Hey, this is Taylor with 3 things to ask your audience during your next presentation using what I call EPF questions that, when done properly, will more quickly engage your audience in your content, qualify your audience to make sure you're talking to the right people, and keep your presentation on point, addressing your audience's biggest concerns. On top of that, if you additionally capture the responses to your EPF questions using a web-based solution like Glisser, you can additionally evaluate how you're doing during your presentation using a quick impact poll that I'll discuss in just a minute, capture all of your audience's best questions, even if you run out of time to address them at the end, which is useful from a sales and marketing follow-up standpoint, and most importantly, you finally get to capture the hard data points about your presentation that you need to ensure your presentation gets better and better every time you give it, all by simply engaging your audience with a few strategic and easy to ask questions. Now, in a short survey we conducted, 87% of presenters agreed that asking questions is an effective way to engage your audience, with 99% reporting back that they always, or at least sometimes, use questions like this to engage their audience, which is great. That said, only 9% of those surveyed said that they were using some means to capture the results to the questions they were asking. That means that over 90% of the presenters out there, and you might be one of them, are missing out on collecting data from arguably the single most important source of data about your topic, your audience. And there are 3 reasons why your audience is such a critical source of data about your topic worth capturing. Reason number 1, your audience is present, sitting right in front of you, requiring no additional research or extra investment on your part to learn more about them now to serve them better in the future. Reason number 2, your audience is opinionated and, assuming you strategically ask the right types of EPF questions that I'll get to in just a second, will freely give you critical insights and opinions about your topic that you might never come up with on your own. And most importantly, reason number 3, your audience is actionable in that they can directly act on your content, assuming you do a good job, which is why it's important to gauge how you're doing during your presentation so that you can continually work on it to improve it. That's why it makes sense, if you can, to not only engage your audience with questions like this, but also capture the results so that you can leverage that data in the future. That said, even if you're not capturing data right now, you can still catch some extremely valuable insights about your topic and your audience using these 3 types of EPF questions. And the first type of EPF question to use early on is E, to evaluate. That is, evaluate who your audience is or where they currently stand against a benchmark statistic that's important to your topic. And I'll give you some examples of this in just a second. But first off, evaluating your audience early on in your presentation like this is not only a great way to warm your audience up and get your presentation rolling, it also gives you the unique opportunity to, number 1, make sure you're talking to the right people and potentially adjust your messaging if you need to. Number 2, it allows you to comment on any discrepancies you find early on about your audience and your benchmark statistic. And number 3, it also creates an interesting takeaway for your audience, showing them where they stand as a group compared to the benchmark statistic you're comparing them to. Now, if you're not capturing your data, maybe you're just having people raise their hands to respond, it's best to use black and white yes and no statistics here so that you can more easily guesstimate the results. For example, during the opening of your next presentation, you might say something like this. Now, before we get started, let me quickly ask, who here is currently working more than 50 hours per week on average? Raise your hands if yes. Or maybe you ask, who here currently works remotely at least 1 day per week? Raise your hand if yes. Both questions here are strategically trying to qualify your audience, assuming that the response to these questions are important to your topic. On the flip side, if you're capturing your data with a tool like Glisser, you can not only ask and capture more detailed questions about your audience, you can additionally display those results live on screen, which creates its own cool graphic. For example, you might kick off your presentation like this. Now, before we get started, let me quickly ask, how many hours per week are you currently working on average? Your audience sees the options on screen, votes using their smartphone, and the results are both captured and displayed on screen for you to comment on. Or you might ask, not including weekends, how many days per week are you working remotely from home or someplace other than your office? Again, your audience sees the options on screen, votes using their smartphones, and the results are both captured and displayed on screen for you to comment on compared to the relevant benchmark statistic you're using about your topic. So that's a fast and easy way to quickly evaluate your audience early on during your presentation. Another way you can use the evaluate type question is to strategically use an impact poll to evaluate how you did during your presentation as the presenter. And the beauty of an impact poll is, when asked properly, is it gives you an unbiased review of your performance. To do that, all you need to do is ask and capture responses to the same exact question about your topic at both the beginning and end of your presentation. For example, If your topic was cybersecurity, at the beginning of your presentation, you might ask and capture responses to this. What is your company's greatest cybersecurity threat for 2019? Your audience votes and you capture and display the responses on screen. Then at the end of your presentation, you simply ask and capture responses to the same exact question. Your audience votes again, now having gone through your presentation, which gives you hard data about how your audience's thoughts and opinions have changed throughout your presentation. That's how a simple little impact poll like this can quickly give you an overall idea about how well you did during your presentation in real time, depending on what your goal was. Now, the second type of EPF question to ask your audience during your next presentation is P for pinpoint. That is, pinpoint what your audience currently thinks or feels about your topic before you head off in the wrong direction, right? There's nothing worse than delivering your presentation only to learn after the fact that you didn't address your audience's main question or concern. All of which you can avoid by simply asking them, and I'll give you a few examples from real presentations here. But first off, if you're again not collecting your data, I recommend sticking with black and white yes/no questions so that you can easily guesstimate the results. On the flip side, if you're again using a tool like Glisser to capture results, you can get more detailed with your questions, as you'll see in the following examples. So here's an example of a presenter using a question to pinpoint which of the 5 forces her audience believes will most impact the future. The presenter asks the question, her audience votes using their smartphone, and the responses are displayed as a donut chart on screen that she can either now address or use the information to adjust her messaging before she heads off in the wrong direction. And here's a second example, again, of a presenter pinpointing what the audience thinks before he heads off in the wrong direction. This time, asking what the audience believes the largest obstacles are, which the presenter can then use to his advantage before, for example, accidentally spending too much time talking about one of the smaller blue regions that very few people in his audience are actually concerned about. And if you're ever stuck coming up with a specific question to pinpoint what your audience thinks or believes about your topic, you can always simply ask your audience how much they know about your topic. In this case, the presenter wanted to know how much his audience knew about the general health industry before moving forward, which he again interactively captured the results on screen for his audience to see. You can also get a bit more creative with your questions if you're using a web-based application like Glisser using pictures. For example, here's an interactive example using pictures to test an audience. Which of the following structures was not designed by Renzo Piano, which the audience sees on their smartphone, which you can see there on the left, and then votes? Again, giving you, the presenter, the information you need to move forward, assuming you're strategically asking questions like this. These again are all great examples from real presentations pinpointing what your audience believes, knows, or is concerned about your topic before you get lost in the details of your presentation. Which again, if you're capturing your data, you can not only display the information on screen during your presentation as an interesting graphic, you can also crunch the data later on to improve your presentation in the future. Now, the last type of EPF question to ask your audience during your presentation towards the end is F for follow-up. That is, asking something about your topic that you can then follow up with them on. For example, maybe asking your audience what their biggest concerns still are about your topic, or maybe even asking your audience what obstacles they still see about your topic moving forward. And the reason these types of questions are better than the standard "are there any questions" question is that follow-up questions like this help you uncover specific issues about your topic that you can address before your presentation is over. This not only improves your presentation on the spot by clearing up any loose ends you might discover, but it also gives you the specific feedback you need to improve your presentation in the future. On top of that, if you're using a tool like Glisser to capture your questions, there are 3 additional benefits you can leverage to engage your audience with these types of follow-up questions. Benefit number 1, you can have your audience members upvote the best questions being asked. That way, if there are a lot of people in the room with more questions than you can answer, you can spend all of your time focused on answering the best questions as upvoted by the audience. Benefit number 2, you can use the questions being asked to create a word cloud on screen highlighting the most common words being used. This makes for an interesting visual aid, as you can see on screen, to highlight the common themes in the questions being asked. This can be used to come up with great talking points at the end of your presentation or to spur interesting conversations during a panel discussion. And the third and most important benefit, which is something you can't do with the normal Q&A microphone method, is that you can capture all of the questions that are asked during your presentation and follow up with the individuals that asked them, even if you didn't have time to address them during your presentation. That way, you can not only follow up with important leads if you want to, you can also see all of the questions and concerns people had about your topic that you can use to improve your presentation in the future. So those are the 3 types of EPF questions you can use to engage your audience during your next presentation. E, to evaluate who your audience is to make sure you're talking to the right people. P, to pinpoint what your audience believes about your topic before you head off in the wrong direction. And F, to follow up to figure out what concerns or issues you still might need to address about your topic to get your audience on board in the future. On top of that, you also saw how if you use a tool like Glisser to capture the results, you can not only use the data during your presentation to do a better job and evaluate how you're doing, you can also use the hard data you collect to improve your presentation in the future, all by simply asking a few simple questions and capturing the results.